Okay, so wasn't totally happy with the texture stamps I have for the skin, so I'm going to make some new ones real quick. Here's the masters that I made the rubber stamps out of, so I'm going to make some more convex shaped ones, so that I can get into places like his armpit where I was struggling. And then I also wanted to make some custom ones that, specifically that one, because that seems to go around all his foldy parts, like knees and elbows and ankles and stuff like that. So I'm going to make this very woody kind of texture, and then probably also this one, which is the more blotchy kind that will, well, I'm not quite sure yet. I'm going to do this for sure. This one I might achieve just by layering another layer of epoxy sculpt over it. In fact, I'm almost sure that's what I'm going to do. So I'm just going to do this for now. I'm going to go ahead and use this freeform, double checking, these are the same ones, yes, freeform sculpt, which I didn't give a perfectly fair review on last time because I didn't mix it perfectly well. So this time I shall mix it perfectly well. One thing I will say about this stuff is it is just way stiffer, way harder. See, I bent my tool just digging it out than the other epoxy resin that I've used. That's not a huge drawback, it's just kind of annoying. So when I go to make a master for a texture stamp, I like to have a raised surface so that when I'm working I can move the tool all around it. If you do it on a flat surface where it's stuck there, you're limited to where you can move your tool. And the other thing is I always keep just a little bit off to the side in case I want to do little additive details. I'm going to keep my reference close by. So I first try to pick out the biggest shapes or forms or patterns in this case. And there's obviously a lot of lines running in one direction, so I'm just going to start by doing that. I'm looking at this image and I see there's a big one that your eye picks up immediately, and then a lot of kind of little ones, and then maybe a bigger one there, and then maybe a bigger one there. The thing I want to try to avoid, and it's usually kind of difficult to avoid, is spacing them out very regularly, because things in nature are rarely spaced out regularly. So I'm not going to put one every half inch or every quarter inch. I'm going to try to do one there, one about there, and then close to that one. And I'm just going to say these are going to be the biggest wrinkles. Actually, let me take back this one. When it's that close to the side, the stamp's probably not going to pick it up. So I'm going to say this will be a big one, and then I'll put my two closer together here. And the way that I'm making sure that these lines are emphasized is by making them much deeper than I'm going to make the other lines. They're going to be a bit wider too, but also I definitely want them to be deeper. Okay, and then I'll mark out some secondary lines. So there's two that are kind of close together. Then I want to make sure to give a little bit of a space between the next one. super close to this big one. Now one thing that I notice in here is you've got a line that goes down, but then you have kind of little break-off lines that kind of give it a bit of a cellular look. So I'll do that in a spot or two. Maybe here. I want to show you another way that you can do an interesting effect. Now this works with all the other epoxy clay that I've used. We'll see how well it works with, what is this called again? Freeform Sculpt. So this is a trick where you basically slap some saran wrap over it, and you do some lines, and all this does is kind of soften. It's like putting a soften filter over your lines, where it's gonna blur out the edges more, which just, you know, gives you a little variety. And pull it off. Yeah, that worked well. It also gives us a little bit of interest in other directions. It's important that I get some visual noise and some, let's say if these are horizontal lines, I want to make sure I got some vertical shapes in there too. I'm thinking one way I could do that is just to punch that up, pat it gently. Yeah, you see I'm getting some different directions. You can do this with aluminum foil as well, but it's going to be a lot harsher. Oh, and here's another trick. When you're doing lines that are going against the grain, so our grain is horizontal, when I'm doing vertical ones, you could lay your foil over a section, and then you're sure that when you're putting these lines in, it's not crossing over the horizontal line. Uh-oh. That stuff likes to stick. But you get the idea. I don't know if it's going to be necessary for this, but it's pretty helpful for like rock walls and stuff like that. You can see the more you do that, it's kind of evening out and destroying the secondary and tertiary forms. So I'm kind of reworking those back in. Still trying to decide how much of these vertical lines I want to work in. And of course, as we've seen many times before, you can smooth it all out with a very soft brush dipped in your either water or smoothing agent. Another, let's do pro tip number 742 is when you're making your stamp, know that you're going to be overlapping, right? Let's use an example here. So this is not something I did for this one, and I wish I had. When you're stamping it onto clay, I'll use this as an example, you're going to be overlapping your stamps quite often. So you'll do one there, and then you'll do one there. And what happens is the areas where they overlap are going to get twice as much detail and density in the lines. So what you can do is fade the detail out around the edges where you know that they're going to overlap. So say about the last, 10th in each direction, I'm going to fade those lines out just by rubbing them down with this smoothing agent, because I don't want all that detail to overlap. And keep your detail focused in the middle section. I'm noticing these lines are getting a little too regular for me. Like it starts out really big, goes medium, a little smaller, a little smaller, a little smaller. Like it's starting to get a pattern. So I want to break that up. That's the kind of thing I'm looking for as I'm scanning back and forth over this thing. Alright, I think I'm going to let this sit, and then I'm going to do another layer of detail over it. In the meantime, let's get back to painting a little bit. I can do this. Painting on... Alright, so this is what I ended up with from my initial 4 tests. I sprayed the dull coat, the clear coat, the matte clear coat on these after I did the washes. So this was the Citadel shade, where I just pooled it up and just let it sit there. You can see all that brown is the pools of the shade. And that's not a bad effect. Might be a little too dirty, too earthy for the game, but I don't know. We'll see. This is the powder coat. So I painted, I did a clear coat, then I did some powder, and I set it and clear coated it. It's cool. I think that'll be neat to have little bits of rust here and there. I don't want that everywhere. Let's see, this is the Citadel shade. And I dabbed it on, so rather than letting it pool up like that, I wiped it all down. It's very dark. I definitely have to do some more dry brushing over this, but I don't know, it's not bad. I'm definitely not getting, on this one, I'm not getting the color differences that I put down there. And this is the, what's it called? Quick Shade. One thing I'm noticing about the Quick Shade is it leaves, you can see the little highlights sparkling in the cracks. That is problematic because it makes it look like there's wet mud in there. So I think I'm definitely going to stay away from the Quick Shade for this purpose. And then I wanted to try a couple more things. I totally forgot, I was looking at some YouTube videos of weathering and stuff like that, and one thing I forgot to do was an oil-based method of creating a wash. And I have these oil paints somewhere. Okay. So I have white, I have burnt sienna, and black. So I think what I'm going to try to do is make a wash by mixing some black and brown. In this case, I don't know why, I think they were cheaper, but I got walnut oil based oil paints as opposed to whatever regular oil paints are based in. So that might affect this a little bit. We'll find out. I'm worried I won't be able to make this runny enough because the walnut oil is pretty thick, as opposed to the white mineral spirits or whatever regular oil paint you mix with. We'll see. Well, that's still looking really saturated brown. Now, the advantage to using an oil-based paint for a shade, from what I've seen from my research, is that because it takes so much longer to dry, you have as long as you want to really get the effect you're after. You can wipe away as much as you want after you've put it on. As opposed to the quick shade and that other stuff, it dries pretty fast. So if you're doing a large area, you either need to do it in multiple little batches, or you're going to end up with more pooling than you might want. And I'm still got a super brown concoction here. So what I'm going to do at this point is just start a new batch with pure black, and then I'll mix in the brown till I've got enough of the slight amount of brown that I actually want. Yeah, that's more like it. Okay. All right, let's see. I'm gonna use a fairly crappy brush because this is just a test. This one leaves hair all over, which means I need to throw it away anyway. Definitely feel like I have more control over this than I did either the quick shade or the Citadel shade. If I want this brick to be lighter, you just scrub it, and I get the vast majority of that wash off. So that's pretty neat. And it lets the colors that I added, you know, the reds and yellows and oranges and stuff, you could definitely tell a difference when you're looking. You know, you'll have that perception that there's irregularity in there, but it's not standing out too much. Because when you look at the game art, it's very uniform, so I don't want to stray too far from that. I'm trying to strike a balance between, you know, realism and being faithful to the game. Tend to err on the side of faithfulness to the game, just because otherwise, you know, why not just make a diorama of something real? Cool. Yeah, so I'll let it dry for probably a couple days, I'm guessing it's going to take. And then I'll hit it with the clear coat and see if the shininess is a problem like it was with the other, with the quick shade. I might as well do one other test while I'm here and just see what happens when I do some dabbing. Since this one turned out shiny anyway, I might as well use this as another test bed. See what happens when we leave it on really thick. Okay, now I'm going to make some texture stamps. I've got the texture, now I need to make a stamp of it. I got these ones as well. Now you saw when I was trying to do the armpit, it was really difficult because it's not shaped like this. So I need to make a nice concave one, or convex, depending on what you consider the inside and the outside, I suppose. Anyway, okay, so I use this amazing mold putty stuff. Simple 2-part 1-to-1 ratio mix. And if you want to see more about making texture stamps, and there are various uses, you can check out my Sculpey 101 series. I believe it's class 8 that goes into that on this channel. I'm trying to leave this little ridge here so I've got something good to grab onto when I'm moving it around, pushing it in and pulling it out. And then I always roll up the edges a little bit along the side. Otherwise you end up with sharp edges. You want them to blend nicely, not be sharp. Right, so essentially what I'm wanting to do is make kind of half a ball with this texture on it. I'm going to start by squashing it out in a circle, grabbing up as much of that delicious texture as I can get. Then I'm going to pull, well, get even more it looks like. Okay, and now I just roll the edges back pretty significantly. I'm doing it gently and just a little bit at a time. If you just wrench it back, you're gonna wipe out most of that texture you grabbed. You can see the amount of texture rolling up on the edges there. This stamp that I have, I made by pouring rubber on it. It's obviously very thin, so it's nice and flexible, but it's got these edges, which I suppose I could just clip those off, but I'd like to have a more round version of it anyway. Doing stamps made me think about something else that not perfectly happy with at this point, which is the texture that I have on the Colossus hand here. Like you can see, I put fingerprints on him. I didn't go crazy just because in the reference, like you can see his hands are they're very blah. And so I wasn't sure how far I wanted to take him. I think I'm gonna keep the back side of the hands closer to the reference, and his fingers are way longer in my sculpture than they are in the reference. I'm not sure how that happened. I think because his hands have to be so big, I just kind of kept the fingers proportional. I think that's alright. I'm gonna let that stand. Am I? I made a lot of really hard decisions through the course of this project to change and adjust things as I've gone. And I've always felt right about those decisions afterwards. But man, shortening these fingers would take, I mean, I'd probably just have to redo the whole thing, the whole hand. And I feel like it would make the piece quite a bit less dynamic. So, I think I'm gonna make an exception to what I've been doing so far, and I'm just gonna stick with what I've got. But yeah, anyway, back to fingerprints. I did some research of what real fingerprints look like, and then I also was looking at some of the architecture around him that had kind of a fingerprinty vibe, since he's so much a part of his environment and he's such a constructed sort of thing. I thought it'd be cool to work some of those design elements into the fingerprint to give it that kind of, you know, bit of artificial magic constructed feel. So yeah, I think I'm gonna make a fingerprint stamp, and I'm gonna redo a lot of the texture around his hand. So yeah, that's what I'm doing. I'm gonna do it rather than sticking with the epoxy clay stuff. I'm going to use Super Sculpey Firm for this one. I'm not sure why. I just feel like it's a better choice. Maybe because the sheer number of ridges and stuff, having a medium that's not setting as you go, because this, you know, Super Sculpey Firm will not set until you bake it. I have unlimited time to kind of tweak it back and forth as needed, so that's probably why I'm feeling that I want to do it that way. And I have an idea for how I'm going to do this. I printed it on this thin paper so I could see it from the back. I'm going to draw the design, the architectural design that I want on this side, and then I'm probably just going to use an X-Acto knife to mark out the lines onto the clay that I want. We'll see how that works. Here's the redone head that I did for Sculpey 101, because the first head I did, my camera kept shutting off and being out of focus, so I had to redo it pretty much. I gotta do something with that head at some point. Not sure what. Since these fingerprints are going to be, well, since the fingerprint stamp is such a specific form, I'm actually gonna build it pretty close to what the actual fingertip is going to be like, so that the texture stamp will already kind of be a bit of a cup in a cupped shape. I don't want it to be completely that way, because I want to still be able to control how far I push it around the edges and stuff, but I'll probably do like almost a bas relief, like a half dome for it.